This is day 19 of our Write It series for Black History Month. Hello, I'm Erica with blacksandperiodfilms.com. For today's picture, we're going to cover this portrait of an African American cook in ordinary costume. After doing some research on this picture, I found a different title of it, a title that adds many more layers to her story. So this the original caption I found with this picture was Portrait of an African American Cook in Ordinary Costume. But after doing some research, I found the caption Portrait of Martha Church, Cook in Ordinary Costume. So this cook's name is Martha Church. So it's really nice to know the actual name of this woman in this portrait. She's not a nameless cook. Her name is Martha Church. And we know more about her. We know a little bit more about her by some other drawings by the Baroness. Um, One thing I want to point out is how beautiful Martha Church looks in this portrait. I don't, from to my eye, I don't see any um, notes of any caricatures that were typical when people drew African Americans and people of African descent at this time. Her face is in proportion, her hair is styled, she looks very calm and poised, and she looks to be a very beautiful woman, Martha Church. I really love this picture, and it's nice to see her in the 19th century clothing. A lot of people see dresses like that and they automatically think Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility. So it's nice to see Martha Church in these same types of dresses. She's a very beautiful woman. So the Baroness and Marguerite also drew two other pictures of women of African descent. One is named, and they both came with different captions, just like with Martha Church. The woman to the left is called Costume of Scrub Woman. That's the original name. But after doing some research, I found her name was Jen, and she's the niece of Martha Church. Um, and then to the right, we have a mulatto girl in half dress. So Baroness Marguerite is a French woman. She's a watercolorist and painter. She ended up in America because her family were royalists during the French Revolution and they escaped. Um, so she lived in the United States from 1807 to 1820 on a New Jersey sheep farm, in New York City settlements, as well as Washington, D.C. And she had a collection of American sketches, which was published in 1807. Because she spent time on a New Jersey sheep farm, I'm making the huge assumption that these three women, Martha Church, Jen, her niece, and this mulatto girl or mixed race woman, she drew these women on the New Jersey sheep farm. So that's a big assumption I'm making. Now, so that made me think about what was New Jersey like, what might have it been like for them, and something that a lot of people don't realize is that the northern states did have slavery at one time. New Jersey's case was especially peculiar because they were basically a slaveholding state without the title of a slave state. So in 1804, they passed an act for the gradual abolition of slavery because there were a lot of abolitionists during the 18th century. So in 19th century, they passed something to gradually abolish slavery. Any female slaves born after July 4th, 1804, they would get their freedom after they reached 21 years old. And male slaves would get their freedom after they reached 25 years old. It's also interesting to note that there was a hidden provision which allowed masters to free their slave children. They would turn them over to the care of the state, and the state would place those children in the home of another slave owner and give them a 3-month stipend to take care of that mixed race child. And that was used by a lot of people because they said that the abandoned blacks line item for the state budget was 40% of the New Jersey budget by 1809. So I wonder if that's what the mixed race woman or the mulatto girl in the picture, perhaps she was one of those children that her father put her in the care of the state to receive a 3-month, $3 a month stipend for her. It was not until 1846 that slavery was permanently abolished. So New Jersey retained slaveholding without technically being a slave state. So many films and series cover slavery in the southern states while they were picking cotton. And while there are a lot of people who do not feel that there need to be any more quote unquote slave films, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. There are so many ways to address the topic, and I think a film or series about these three women could do that in an interesting and a new and refreshing way. But we also have to acknowledge that they might not have been slaves at all. They might not have been slaves at all because in New Jersey, the Dutch West Indian Company, after that company folded and left, they freed all of the slaves that they owned. And so that made an enclave of free blacks in New Jersey. So perhaps these three women were workers, but they were paid workers. That's another way we could address their story. And so the question is, what was life like for these women? We know that Martha, the woman in the middle, Martha Church, was the aunt of Jen on the left. So, how did she end up with her? Were Jen's parents there? Was she left in the care of Martha Church? And who was the mulatto girl? Who was her mother? Who was her father? And what was her situation like? Were they happy? Were they unhappy? Or were they just content? There's so many ways to address their story. Were they enslaved or were they free? However, we address the lives of Martha Church, Jen, and the mulatto girl, there's so many ways to go about telling their story. They could be free, they could be enslaved, they could be happy, they could be unhappy. But we know, regardless of how their story was told, that they were there. And so I believe their story should be told. Someone should write it.